Hot diggity dog, it's working. Excellent. All right. So the plan for today, oh, before I get into that, I have to pretend to be nice and care. Did everybody have a nice week and weekend? Excellent. Not, I don't really care, but I know that it's important to you normal people that I kind of express that. So actually, I struggle with, and my kids do, all of us struggle with severe social anxiety. And it has been traumatic over the years to speak in public. And I am LDS. I was raised LDS. So knowing I was going to have to be a volunteer minister, I started making rules to follow and routines that my brain now just does habitually, so that people didn't know how absolutely terrified I was. And it was, and I thought it was just me. Evidently, our family has a lot of people in it, and the extended family that are on the spectrum. And so a lot of us have really odd ways of interacting. And my daughters, like my youngest, could not order from McDonald's at all, ever. She couldn't order from the drive-thru or anything. And so her sisters and I gave her some of these routines that I developed, and she started practicing by going to Dutch Bros 2 or 3 times a week. And now she works, if you guys ever get to Quilter's Lodge in Layton, not Layton, where's Quilter? Yeah, I think it's Layton, about 120 South, right around there, in towards Salt Lake. But she works there now, and you know, all the octogenarians that come in for the quilting stuff love talking to her because she's so friendly. And nobody would know that we hate people. So if my family was the one in The Hills Have Eyes, the movie would not have gone very far, because it would have been, nobody knows about the people that live in the hills because they don't want to talk to anyone, which doesn't work as a movie title. Well, today people have started turning in. A lot of people have turned in their structure with skin stuff. And this class, I need everybody to understand that when you turn something in, the grade is not final at all. And in lieu of meeting in person, the grade, I'll write comments down, and then we want to talk about it so you can go back, readdress it, and return it in. If this was a live class where we were meeting together in person, then we would be doing that constantly in our couple sessions that we meet every week, but we can't. So I need people to understand, I need everybody to understand that the grades are not final until after the very end of the semester. That is really important. I've noticed that about half of the people in the class are taking advantage of that, particularly with the written assignments and stuff. Some people have turned around and resubmitted within 3 minutes after I wrote the grade. And it's usually just a really dinky thing, and you get the points. The biggest problem with the two biggest problems, I think, with the low grade or lower grade is either the assignment parameters haven't been followed, or the person is working and this is the preliminary. So it's not quite finished. And it's really vital for everybody to understand that, because neither of those have any reflection on your intelligence, your skill set, or anything. Because I believe Whitney and Christina, both of you are 2D artists, aren't you? How many times in your entire life have you actually been forced into a class where you're making sculpture? So yeah, so if you don't do things exactly perfect on the first try, all that means is you've got to work on it. You've got to tweak it a bit. That's not a big deal at all. I think that's one of the, and I'm going to rant for a bit now. So if you guys want to plug your ears, that's fine. But that's one of the biggest problems with the American educational system that we have right now, so many legislatures are so bent on getting the numbers so that they have some fake attributes to give to their constituents. Because most legislators, if not all, know that education is important. But very few of them have the vocabulary to adequately express that so absolutely everybody in their constituency can understand. And the simplest way to deal with that or step around it is with numbers. And if you give statistics, that is very less than useful. And so the education system is controlled by this desire to manufacture statistics that do not illustrate, that do not communicate what people are learning. And we have all been trained to do the test so that the test is right. And if it isn't right, then we feel horrible. When actually, I think that people do much better when there's 2 or 3 tests. The initial test is to govern which things you have a handle on and which you don't. And then when you've got that under control, then the evaluation is fair. Because then you can express what you actually know. And I like having that in the back of my mind for this class, because you guys can redo, resubmit, change things up until the very end. And I do not have a problem with redoing grades at all. And in fact, I prefer that because that shows that you're actively learning. I'm really glad that this fake screen behind me edits out when I scratch my ears, because that just looks ridiculous. So I appreciate that it does that. Now, Christina and Whitney, do you guys understand that, what I'm saying? Okay. All right, excellent. Because the reality is, for people that have focused on 2D art, for their professional career, you will get headaches because your brain has to create new neuronic pathways as you're going through all this 3D stuff. And that is not a bad thing, but you will get headaches. And I have a product that I use made by Now. It's NOW. It's a dietary supplement brand that Walmart carries, but it's called D-Flame, and you can also get it through Amazon. But it's great. It's an all-natural kind of way to make your brain decompress a little bit instead of popping ibuprofen. but it does help. The other reality is, the first time you attempt any of these things, quite honestly, it's the best you've ever done in your entire life, because it's the first time you've tried it. And if we were just grading on that, then everybody would get like A+. But to meet with the department standards and expectations, and to prepare yourself to be, a fully functioning professional artist with a college education or university education, the assignment parameters need to be followed. So you're not graded or evaluated on your worth as a person. You're evaluated on how you are expressing the parameters of the assignment, and that's it. Does everybody get that? Okay, absolutely. I appreciate that. And if you do feel that I'm attacking you individually, please let me know. I have actually had that happen a couple times, and we learned later that the individual that was doing it had severe interaction disabilities. And once we understood that, then there was no longer a problem. We were able to take care of it. But yeah, that's, by the time you get to this class, you guys know how to be professionals. You know how to do professional quality work. And the only problem I've had has been functional issues. It has nothing to do with your worth as an artist. All right. Today, the things that I wanted to talk about is, I wanted to look at what people have been turning in, and we'll just go through a quick evaluation of each of those that have been turned in. And then I wanted to touch on the annotated bibliography really, really quickly, and just remind people about that. And then we do have a PowerPoint that's been turned in, but one of the issues with the PowerPoint, one of the parameters of the PowerPoint is that it needs to have the voiceover. And it looks like this person did everything they were supposed to, but for whatever reason, the Canvas is not extracting the correct information. And so they'll need to find another way to record it or do one of those file translation programs. I can't remember what it's called, when it turns like JPEGs to PDFs kind of thing. And for me, the simplest way to do it, the two simplest ways have been to open up a Teams meeting just with yourself, record it, and do a screen share with your PowerPoint so you can voice over or narrate your PowerPoint. And so far this semester, I've had, in the different classes that I teach, I've had 3 people have somebody else narrate for them, which turns out really good, because you get to hone what you want the other person to say, and you don't have to deal with somebody else hearing your voice. It is really sad. You guys know that Darth Vader passed away just in the last couple of weeks. Oliver James Earl Jones passed away. There are a handful of people that in my mind are the voice of God, and he is one of them. Absolutely beautiful. And what is so wonderful to me is when he began, he almost quit as an actor because he had terrible stuttering and had stage fright and was just horrified of doing that, but something drove him to continue. And I am so glad that my children and I have had the wonderful experience to be entertained by somebody like him. Did you guys know he was a stutterer? He had a nasally, stuttery voice, and he consciously worked at it and became a world-renowned Shakespearean actor. And then right after knocking him flat with his Shakespearean stuff, he was asked to be the voice of Darth Vader, and whole new populations of people are amazed by his voice that never would have got to hear it otherwise. I think, and I love it when people do leave legacies like that. How wonderful is it to leave a legacy like that, as opposed to have yourself recorded getting angry at your neighbor because you don't expect it, and be the voice of the Karen in the U.S. social media. Oh, that is terrible. Anyway, so we are going to go. I'm going to do a screen share right now, and what I want to do is I would like you guys to give. I'm going to look at each one. I'm only going to spend like a minute or two on each one, and we're going to talk about the things that I think are good and the things that I think could be improved. And as people watch this, I want them to go back and fix the things that they worked on and then resubmit it. Whatever they need to work on. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Does that sound good with you guys? Okay. Okay, I believe we did see this last week already. And I think that it was a good one in that it deals with height, and it deals with a little bit with the front and back, or depth. I think that this could benefit from having something sticking out to either side as well. I think that would be really nice. I like how this person photographed this. I think it looks really good, photographed like this. And one thing I appreciate is their choice in paper. I think that is really fascinating. I love it. Feels translucent, and I think that's really interesting. What do you guys think?
The first thing I noticed was the translucent paper, which I really liked as well, because that also adds depth.
Okay. All right, great.
I agree with that. I also think that the quality of the photograph that they took to present the piece is very nice. The lighting and shadow of the background looks great.
That's something that I noticed too. And it is really frustrating to me that you can pour, a portion of your life into making something, and if the photograph sucks, nobody else can appreciate it. So I'm really grateful that you guys are stepping up. I think this class has had the nicest set of photographs out of any of my previous classes. So I really appreciate that. Right now this is another really good one. I like this. It feels like it's going away from me and then rising up. So it definitely has two of those three dimensions. But like the one we just saw, I think that this would really benefit from having something that comes out to either side someplace. I love the fact that they're using an octahedron as one of the principal modules. It looks like the modules are more like portions of an octahedron. And I like how they kind of mixed up the skin a bit. But I think this would really benefit from having something like where my mouse is off to the side here, over here, a little bit to either side. What are you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I also like the way that it looks like it's curving away and then up. And I like how there's kind of variations of the shape in the piece.
How about you, Whitney?
I think like the last one, they did a good job photographing it, because if you didn't have that shadow underneath, so the overhead lighting, you would have no idea that it's going out to and up.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, very, very good observation. For this one, the only suggestion I would make about the photograph itself is to edit it down a little bit to get rid of this little corner. And I think that the photograph itself would be just fine. But for this piece itself, I'd like to see some side-to-side activity. I think that is going well. Okay, my initial impressions on this one are very favorable. Again, I think this is an excellent photograph. And I love the fact that they have done this kind of truncated octahedron. It almost looks like an octagonal diamond shape or something. Well, I guess it's nonagonal because there's 9 sides. I really like the fact that they have, this seems to me to deal with all 3 of those dimensions really well. The depth, height, and width. I also really love the fact that like this area here hides, this area here hides, this area here, the skin frames the sticks. And I think they've done a really good balance of skin and structure. What do you guys think about that? And I like the color too. It's not an ordinary everyday color that you see. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was going to say the same about the structure and the skin. I like that parts of it you're seeing the skin from the front and it's blocking out the structure. And then on other parts, you're seeing the structure with the skin in the background more.
Right. What do you think, Whitney?
I like the choice of the modular shape that they chose. It's pretty unique and has different dimension to it, and the way they played with it is really nice.
Yeah, definitely. And I love it because what is nice about this is that it's unusual and it's not any more difficult than any of the other shapes we've seen, really. That's very cool to me, I think. So yeah, good observations. Okay, here we have a few different photos. And I think this is a good one to share. This is another good example of photography where somebody's paying attention to it. I love the fact that you can see so many different kinds of shadows. This starts, for whatever reason, this starts making me think of what's the latest Aliens movie, Prometheus. This reminds me of kind of this odd unfolding flower. And it is very symmetrical, which a lot of the times can be a problem, but it doesn't really feel like a problem here. And I love how this person has made a tetrahedron their shape, but it's a lengthened tetrahedron. And you can see that here. And it's kind of fun to see how they've put this together in several different variations. And I like how that view is very different than this view. Again, they are addressing height, width, and depth. And I also like the fact that they have used a couple different kinds of sticks for their structure. What are your guys' thoughts?
The first thing I noticed was the variation in the sticks used, the popsicle sticks versus the thinner, I cannot think of the word right now, but it makes the bottom feel heavier and then lifting up into a.
Yeah, I think so. How about you, Christina?
I really like the uniqueness of the shape. I feel like it's quite different than anything we've seen, and I like that.
You know, and this is one thing that I think is can be problematic with an online class because people aren't responding to each other's forms. I think that this turned out really well, and this is, I think, one of the reasons why I really like the fact that we have the discussion format so people can at least see what other folks are doing. But yeah, I agree with that. It's not like anything that we've seen. Nice. This is one that I think is another really good example of nice photography. And I think it looks really interesting. I like the fact that it addresses height, width, and depth, but it feels to me like it doesn't have enough going on. It feels just a little bit. It feels like it needs more to really embrace the assignment parameters. It feels like it only has a few of the modules. I really like how this is developing. I like how the skin is on the same piece of each of the tetrahedrons, or same area of each of the tetrahedrons, and that they've kind of cycled around. I think what I would like to see is maybe 4 more of these structures applied to this at different angles. You know, starting off with this and maybe having each one just at a completely different angle. I think that might be really interesting. Because this feels like it's starting in a very solid and good direction. I just feel that it needs a little bit more to fit with the assignment. But I like where this is going. What do you guys think?
To me, it reminds me of a pinwheel. I feel like there's a lot of movement in the way that they've aligned the modules. And I do kind of like it looks like maybe masking tape that they put around the
corners?
dowels. Yeah, I think that's interesting.
It is really interesting.
I had the same thoughts as Whitney. I noticed the pinwheel shape in there too, and I wondered if the wrapping around the structure there is a structural element. Is it taped together, or if it's more of a decorative touch?
I think it's probably both because it looks very structural. You know, I see the tape here to kind of hold these triangles together, and the triangles are each made with this on the corner. But the way at how consistent it is makes me also believe that it's a visual element. So I think it's both. Yeah, I like this kind of take because you're right. It does give a very strong sense of movement to it. Okay, you guys can't see this, so I'm going to do something different to share the screen. There we go. Okay, this is another, again, all of these have been photographed really well. I'm really happy with that. One of the things I like about this, well, there's a couple. One is they started with a tetrahedron. Okay, that's obvious right here. And it looks like to me that what they did was decided with the tetrahedron, we're going to put paper on one side of each one. But then they scaled it. Like this one is really small and this one is large, and each one is incrementally smaller going this way or incrementally larger going this way. And they've kind of hooked them together in something like approaching a Nautilus shell. What I like, another thing I like about this is that it does feel like it addresses height, width, and depth. And it is also becomes almost graphically dynamic because like right up here, these are almost like right in your face because of the way they photographed it. So they did a brilliant job photographing this. I think this turned out really successful. And I love the fact that this paper just feels almost like, to me, like the parchment paper you'd cook with. So, you know,
I used tracing paper on that.
Oh, you tracing paper?
Okay. Because parchment paper won't glue. I don't know. Glue will not hold it.
Okay.
So I tried parchment paper first, but then went with tracing paper.
All right. So this is yours.
It is.
All right. That's your comment. What do you think about it, Whitney?
I really like the scaling that you did, and then the way you photographed it really exaggerates that. And then again, kind of like the one we just saw, it has a lot of movement and rhythm to it, which I think you did really good on.
Thank you.
What do you think about it, Christina?
I was really happy with it. I felt like it was kind of a frustrating. I was kind of frustrated while making it. I had kind of a hard time figuring out my direction, and then just assembling it. You know, trying to get things to stay in place while I held other things in place long enough for glue to dry and stuff. But the end result, I like it quite a bit, and I actually have it on. I have it sitting on my piano now.
Yeah, I think it turned out well.
Thank you.
Oh, let's see. Hold on a sec. Sigh. I had everything called up all ready to go, and now okay, there we go. Sorry about wine. Okay. I really like the shape of this, and I really like the colors. I like the fact that they use tissue paper, green and blue tissue paper. I think this is good for that vertical kind of thing. But what I would like to see is maybe 3 or 4 more of these modules, maybe one so that one of the edges connects right here and it swings out. And doing that in a couple different places would really make this very interesting. Because I think one thing that this needs to do more, that I want it to do more, is to expand out either towards me or away from me, as well as side to side a bit. Because this feels very vertical still. But I think that, and it might even be interesting to do 3 of these and have them clustered around here, so this almost looks like a weird flower form or something. But I do think it needs something like that to address width and depth as well. But I love the structure, I love the shapes, and I love the choice in the skin. And the way that the skin is done, so sometimes it's in front of you, and sometimes the sticks are in front of you. I think that is really a good balance. So what are you guys thinking?
I really like the use of two colors. And then the colors with the shape are nice. It reminds me of kites, maybe flying.
I really like that it feels imbalanced, but it is balanced, so it's very engaging that way.
Yeah, that is a little unsettling to me because it looks like it should be falling over. And I like the fact that it doesn't, because that really that's one of those 7 principles of audience engagement we had. I think it was the first or second quiz, where you're just kind of forced to engage with it because you want to reach out a hand and hold it, keep it from falling over. So it's movement like the pinwheels, but in a different way. I think that turned out well. Okay. Give me a second here. I'm going to fiddle with this. Now, this is another one that I think is a really good start, but it feels to me like this in itself is almost a module. And I'd like to see like 3 or 4 things just like this, because then the person could put it together and really engage the volume of space, height, width, and depth. As it is, it feels like it's just getting started. And I think that the photography choice, I think, do you remember when I showed you a couple of weeks ago how to do the photo with just a simple sheet? I think that having that infinity, or having either the tag board behind it or a sheet behind it, would really benefit the photography on this, I think. Because the wood surface is really interesting, but for this kind of a thing, the strong texture of the wood and the dynamic color difference between the wall and the wood really detract. Our attention should be on what was made. And so I think that would benefit. But I think that this is a really solid start. I love how they've played with the paper, so that, again, some of it is on the far side and some of it is on the front side. But I think that this needs a little bit more before it's complete, finished. What are your guys' thoughts?
I like the shape that's happening. It's sort of like a windmill.
Yeah,
I think that's nice.
I think it ties into that same kind of energy that a couple of the other ones you commented about did. What do you think, Whitney?
I think it is a good start, and I do think that it would be helpful to have a solid background to not distract from the piece as well. But I do think what they have is really nice.
All right. Excellent. Okay, this next one reminds me, there's this, I think he's a Danish engineer that makes some really fascinating stuff. This one, it seems like they've kind of wandered away a bit from the module, the repeated module form. I don't know if I mind that entirely. This feels like it's there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think the structure is important. There is this this Danish engineer who builds these big sculptures out of sticks that move, and they move with wind power. So they'll walk across a beach or something with the wind blowing. And that's what this kind of reminds me of. I think it satisfies the components of the assignment as far as structure and skin balance and engaging volume, but it strays a long way away from the module and creating a module that's replicated. And I don't know how exactly that can be fixed. And it may just be as simple as making 2 more boxes of various size like this thing and sticking one here and one in the back, maybe. And maybe that would do it. Or adding a stick right here so that this one feels like it's a relative to this. Because I did say that you could make, using the module, you could repeat it and change it a bit in the repetitions. But these changes seem to be way far away, at least in this view. And maybe the solution would be as simple as taking a photo from a different perspective so you can see the module repetition more clearly. I do like the photo, and I love the fact that it's lit so you can see, it looks kind of really energetic right here with all the sticks going back and forth. And photographed with this lighting, you can really see those sticks in the shadows on the ground. I think that part is really nice. And I would like to see maybe a couple more pieces of paper, like maybe one right here, one back here. I think that would benefit from that as well. What do you guys think?
I like that you use the word energetic because it does. I expect it to kind of walk off. It reminds me of a AT-AT or something from Star Wars. I do think that it's not really the modular thing that the assignment parameters said, but I like how it turned out.
All right, good. How about you, Whitney?
I do think the variety is interesting. I see lots of, repetition in like triangular faces and then the square faces. I'm like trying to find the repetition in the modules, but I do think that the variety is interesting.
Yeah, it has a lot of really good variety. This one is really fascinating to me. It feels to me that the module is like 2 triangles stuck together. I like the fact that this almost feels like it's not quite a bubble, but it's expanding out like that. It has some stuff going through the middle of it. I think there's a good balance of being able to see sticks in front and skin in front, but it's achieved in a really interesting way. In most of the other ones engaged the volume around it with almost fingers sticking out into the volume, like that lit match sculpture. And this engages the volume around it in a way that reminds me more of Anish Kapoor's Skygate, which is, or Cloudgate, which I think is really interesting. And just when I think I'm getting used to it being like a house type structure, then you get triangles like this that poke into the center and are and hollow. That kind of ruin that expectation. This is really an interesting one to me, and I like the way that they interpreted the assignment in this because it's not what I expect. What do you guys think?
I like that they incorporated negative space within and then obviously around it as well. But I feel like this one's a little bit different with the amount of negative space inside of the structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like how that it looks like there's a cave in there, or like a jungle gym from
Right.
the playgrounds in the 80s.
Well, it makes me think of a jungle gym that got caught in the process of being turned inside out. I think it's really fascinating. This is really interesting because I wonder if this person and the previous person worked together, saw each other's stuff as they were making it. And I think it's really fascinating. The module seems to me, again, it's based on a couple of triangles. I think this one is really interesting where the structure kind of sandwiches the paper right there. So it looks like this is the module here where you have that strong base triangle, another one right here, and then a support strut. And it looks like all of them are made like that. And I think it's really fast. That's really fascinating. And I like the fact that you don't get the skins on the same plane at all the way. I mean, everyone is it's on a different plane. This is really interesting to me. It feels compact and tight. Not quite claustrophobic, but it also manages to engage with height, width, and depth. And I think the photography is really interesting because it does emphasize and makes a couple of these shapes very dramatic in the shadows. That's really an interesting one. What do you guys think?
I like the way that the paper is framed out in the triangles. It makes the skin much more dramatic, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I really like the way that the modules are, they feel like they're like leading lines into the center and that being the focal point. So now it feels like it's exploding outwards. I think that's really interesting.
It is really fascinating because we can come back to it and there's still things to look at. And I really enjoy it when somebody takes the time to do that. It looks like to me that the module for this is an octahedron. And it looks almost like the person did 3 pieces of skin on each one, 3 or 4, but it's not always the same. Maybe it is the same. But one thing I like about this is that they're not put together in a tower. They're not put together so it's flat. It's really kind of interesting how this kind of moves. Again, it engages height, width, and depth. And it feels to me like this is almost in the process of crawling. More like how a slug crawls rather than Thing from the Addams Family. I like how the skin is in some places in front and in some places behind. I think that's really interesting. And the photograph itself, I really like this as the center of the photograph because there's lots of interesting things for your eyes to look at. What do you guys think?
I like how you can look through that center open triangle and see the structure behind it. There's a lot of interesting things going on there, and how the whole piece is kind of in an arch. It's like crawling off the base.
And I think if it remained a flat arch, that would be kind of annoying, but it doesn't. It branches out a little bit. I think that makes it interesting. Okay, what do you think, Whitney? And try to divorce yourself from the fact that you made it.
So funny thing is when I was starting to put the modules together, I actually was placing them up vertically and then it fell over at some point, and I was like, oh, I like that direction better. And then I started working on it from there. So happy accident, I guess. But I like how it turned out with the variety and seeing the structure and the placement of the skin.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It's really neat.
Right, this one has a very similar module, except this is a tetrahedron. And it's interesting to me that like these two are almost identical with where the paper is and everything. And then you have a split here, and then you've got some other things going on with the paper. You know, like this one, it's just covering half of the triangle. I think that this is really a fascinating one. I would like, on this one, I would like to see probably 2 or 3 more of these modules. And I think I like one of them on this bottom left side so that the whole thing is rocked up a little bit. So it's on a tripod instead of resting down like that. And I think that would activate it a little bit more. And then another module or two stuck in different areas to kind of branch out and really activate the volume around it. Because this feels like it has a handle on depth, but it feels to me like it still needs something to really activate those other dimensions. I really like how this person is dealing with ideas of structure and skin. Areas like this with these 3 sticks coming together, this stuff going on in the back here, this extra stick right there, and this, you know, half skin right there. I think all that is really cool to see because they built very specifically, they built a rhythm, a visual rhythm, and then they're playing with it, which I think is a good way to engage your audience. What do you guys think?
My favorite part is the smaller triangle that they added for the skin. That is like the focal point to me because it's so different than the other formal triangles, just because it's scaled down. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I like that there's just different lines going on that you don't expect, like the vertical line in the center triangle that you see. Yeah. I just think there's a lot of visually interesting things happening.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And I think that this is an excellent start. And I think all it would take would be having another couple of these tetrahedrons, one down here, so the whole structure rocks up a bit, and then maybe 1 or 2 over here to kind of flesh it out so it activates all the dimensions. But I think that this is turning out really good. All right, that's great. Now I'm going to, I want to look again at the student examples right here. It looks like people were pretty aware of what these examples were and played on them, played against them. I like that. I like it when it's obvious that everybody's having a conversation with the material in the course. I really like that. The student I was mentioning who had a social, couldn't get along socially with people, had a really difficult time engaging with the material in the module and wanted to do their own thing. And what I'm seeing with you guys is you're not doing that. You're paying really close attention. And I appreciate that. Appreciate that quite a bit. Okay, I'm going to show something else. I'm going to switch gears now a bit. One of the assignments is the annotated bibliography. Have both you guys done that? Okay. I want to show this. This is just from the middle of somebody's assignment. And this is a really good setup, I think, where they've done the citations according to MLA standard with that access phrase on the end. They've done both of that. The only thing that I think would really benefit is 2 to 3 sentences of summary. And then I would like to see 3 to 5 sentences as a reflection. And I think I talked about that. So if you're not getting full points on that part of the project, what I'm usually suggesting is to go back and look at specifically how long your summary and reflection paragraphs are. And there needs to be 2 paragraphs. And then make sure that the accessed on phrase is there and all the citations are in alphabetical order. And it reads better as well. One thing that you'll notice that person did is they had spaces between the citation and each paragraph, so it was a lot easier to read, and I really appreciate that. Okay, so that's weird. Okay, we're going to look at and the PowerPoint that somebody did, and again, the formatting did not come through on Canvas, so this person will need to record this with their voiceover as a video file. I started talking, I mentioned the way to do it with Teams. You can do it with Zoom, but I've also had several people do this, make it as a video file where they just set up their phone and have their phone in front of the screen and then just go through the PowerPoint slides and have their phone recording them as they talk about it. And that's fine too. Now this is supposed to be clickable. And for whatever reason, Canvas is not allowing me to click on it. So I would say, you know, the simplest way to do that is to just have the person do a presentation. But of course, they picked Martin Sen. And then each of these, it talks about some of the artwork that they've done. And they did not turn it into a biography, which is really nice. And then I'm imagining that they're talking about the different pieces that are being shown, which is great. And then talking about some of the other stuff that Martin Sen is interested in and what they're going into. And sharing a similar artist that works with some similar type ideas. And you can really see the thematic similarities, which I like. And then with the works cited page, they've done a really good job. It looks like to me that all the parameters are met for MLA style. The only thing is these 3 are missing the accessed on phrase, and that's it. But this person turned this in quite a ways early, so they have plenty of time to fiddle with that and get it in. So I wanted that to be in everybody's mind. That's due in like 2 or 3 weeks. I'm thinking that what I would like is everybody's input on this. When you do your attendance assignment, 5 things that you learned, would you also email me separately and just let me know what you think about this? I'm thinking it might be interesting or might be worthwhile to push due dates back a week so that people who need to finish the structure and skin thing can do that, and then have the additional time also to work on the biomorphic carving. And that's another thing that I wanted to talk about today. I'm not going to be spending an awful lot of time talking about the carving itself. We're going to talk about that a lot next week, and some examples and things like that. You do have in your kit, you have knives and you have a file or a hasp that you can use to carve this. One thing I do want to say about it is there are a couple videos that talk about carving balsa wood and other stuff like that. You're not carving balsa wood, you're carving the foam. The principles are very similar. The tools are different. However, there is a big issue you need to be aware of. The foam shavings go everywhere, absolutely everywhere. It is a massive pain in the butt. They respond to static, they stick everywhere. So when you do this, I would recommend, if you can, do it in a garage or outside when the wind isn't blowing, and sweep it up as best you can. If you do it inside, make sure you have a good vacuum clean, a shop vac to clean it up. Make sure that your clothes are clothes that you don't really care about. I actually went out and bought myself a set of clothing from DI specifically for this project so that I wouldn't get all my nice clothes gooey. And it's not really a matter of goo so much as the foam powder sticks to everything. It's horrible. So make sure you clean up and try as well as you can. Instead of having plastic underneath you, get like a big sheet to put underneath you, because then it's easier to clean up the sheet and vacuum it than it is to try to get the foam chunks off of the plastic. That is just, it's horrific, basically, is what it is. When you carve this, I do give a short example of when I was carving. When you carve this, make sure that you engage the 3 dimensions, height, width, and depth. And it's very important that you try to change direction in your carving so it doesn't read as a flat object that's only in relief. Like if you're going to be doing something with 2 loops, don't have the loops making an 8. Change the angle or presentation of the loops so that they're at angles to each other. All right, because you don't want something flat. If it's flat, then there's really no reason to do it in 3D. And we want to engage 3D shapes. Think of things like teeth, succulents, bones, branches, underwater coral structures, different things like that, and how they join and engage several different planes as they come together. And I want to so go over this, read it, and look at these kinds of forms. And again, we'll talk about this more next week. But biomorphic abstraction, think about these kinds of structures like the Venus of Willendorf, and go before you start carving. Look at all the artists in the background list. Let's see. I'm going to. Go through and look at each of these artists and how they talk about, oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Getting to the modules. Look at each of these artists that produce stuff and how they approach this idea of making an abstract carving. Remember in the most recent quiz, you see a reclining figure by Henry Moore. That's the one where you ask about the negative space. Those are the kinds of forms that we're looking for. The organic forms that are abstracted, they're out of context, but they also engage several different planes of viewing. It's not flat. I think that this is a particularly good one to look at, describing what you see. Henry Moore, the reclining figure. I don't want you to copy that, but look at the forms that Henry Moore is using. So go through each of these before you design your sculpture at all. Watch all of the background videos and look at all the artists. And I want to talk, we have about a half an hour. Hopefully we'll have time to touch on the quiz as well. But I want to talk about what abstraction means. And we're going to discuss that. And because I think that this is really an important element in approaching this assignment. Now, all of you know what abstract is, but I really want to clarify that. I'm doing it with two-dimensional art in this case. So if we look at this, I do have this labeled as a tree. But one of the things you'll notice right away about this painting, does it look more naturalistic or more abstracted?
Naturalistic.
Yeah, it's obvious that it's a tree. And you have all heard the phrase, art imitates nature. It's attributed to Plato. He did say that. I believe it was in the Republic. What everybody forgets is right before that, he said, nature is a manifestation of the divine will, and art imitates nature. So what that means, if art imitates nature and nature is a manifestation of will, then art should be a manifestation of our will. That changes it quite a bit. That changes the phrase quite a bit, doesn't it? No longer are you limited as an artist to making things that everybody can make because everybody sees the same thing. What you now are required to do, if you are imitating nature and nature is a manifestation of will, then when you create a tree, your tree must be a manifestation of who you are. All of a sudden, does that mean, is your tree going to look like anybody else's tree? It can't. Not if it's art. Everything is going to be, and people are going to be disagreeing with me. I appreciate that, and that's fine. Naturalism is very important to artistic expression. Naturalism sometimes is the set of symbols that an artist will use to express their will, to express what they see. Now, if we look at the trees back here, are these trees more real naturalistic or are they more abstracted? These trees back in the background.
I would
They're
say
more
abstracted. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, they're more abstracted. These become blobs. And in the foreground tree, we can see individual leaves with individual colors. We can see individual branches, all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting to me that the artist made this very naturalistic, and to kind of emphasize the naturalism, they made the background kind of blurred out. Like these trees are not trees at all. They become complete streaky reflections, just like what a tree looks like in the water. And I think that's fascinating. And by comparison with this abstract gray field back here, I think that the realism of this tree really helps to stand out. Now, if we look at this, would you say this tree, right, or these trees right here, are they more naturalistic or abstracted?
I think they're still pretty naturalistic.
Yeah, I think so. This is a painting from the Hudson River School, which is believed to be the first real art movement that was distinctly American, early to mid 1800s. And it's a series of very naturalistic, realistic paintings that are kind of an expression of European realism, except if you look at all the Hudson River School paintings, they feel like human beings are almost an afterthought on the landscape. And you can see evidence of human habitation, but nature is almost more powerful. Like right here, we see domesticated cattle. We see a man right there. We see a person right there. We see a ship with a person right down here. But they're blurred out to the point where the only reason you really can intimate that they're humans at all is because of the scale and the changing color and the rough shapes, because they really are not very fleshed out and realistic. And then back here on the right-hand side or left-hand side, you can start seeing structures right here and over here. Again, almost abstracted to the point where we don't know what they are. And the only reason we have an idea of what they are is context. And that's it. I think it's really an interesting use of naturalism. Now, if we look at this is actually, we're starting to look at the Name tradition, or the illustrated book tradition that comes out of India and Persia and really heavily influenced medieval Russian artwork. Would you say that this is more naturalistic or abstracted?
It's definitely becoming more abstracted. It's becoming stylized.
Now, if we saw this, if you and I woke up one day, looked out the window and saw this, would that bother you very much? I mean, it wouldn't bother me. I could still live with it. And this definitely, yeah, not a big deal. But if I woke up and looked out of the window and this was in my yard, I would be seriously concerned. Because yes, we can identify it as a tree, but this is in a world where every single leaf is exactly facing you. Every bird is completely and perfectly poised. Every flower is either in perfect profile or perfect frontal view. There's no way that this could exist in the real world, but it's still realistic enough that we can identify easily what it is, can't we? Yeah, this is approaching abstraction, and abstraction is the simplification of shapes and forms. But still, this is almost a symbolic abstraction where the symbols are close enough to what we can engage with and see in our real everyday life. Now, this is the New Hampshire flag. How would you react if you looked out your window and saw that tree? I mean, it would be fundamentally disturbing, wouldn't it? If it was a black silhouette and it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, not that big of a deal. But if it's like noon and you see that and that's supposed to be the tree, holy crap, that would frighten me. This is definitely more abstracted, isn't it? Definitely more simple. Simple to where the color is toned down, where it's just one shade. And it's just in a field of red. What are the things that you can identify that make this, or make it so we can label this a tree?
You can see the trunk and what you know are boughs.
Yeah. And in everyday context, we are so used to seeing a simplified abstraction of a tree along these lines that we can take it. It's palatable as long as it's on a two-dimensional surface. But you see this out in a park when you're walking around, and that would be unnerving, to say the least. Okay, now, given the context of what we've been talking, hopefully you'll still know what this is. What is this?
I'm guessing a tree.
Yes, it's kanji for tree. What makes this a tree?
Roots, maybe?
Yeah, you have 3 different structures that we can identify hopefully as a tree. Particularly, this is a tree that we can see as at a horizon. Where's the trunk line?
The center vertical.
Yes. Where are the branches?
The top horizontal.
Actually, that's really good. In this case, the branches are these diagonal lines, but yeah, that's really good. this does represent the horizon.
Oh, okay.
But it's interesting, but we can still read it pretty easily. I mean, you could tell right away what it was, right? And if the two diagonals are the root bump and that horizontal are the branches, that reads fine too, doesn't it? Yeah, excellent. Very good. Where are the trees here?
I think only in the color. I don't know. I'm not seeing a lot of tree there.
Yeah, exactly. It's only the color. So here we have a very abstracted tree where we know we can still relate to it because it's an identifiable silhouette. In this, the tree has become a symbol where, you know, we have the trunk, we have branches, but it's simplified to the point where if you didn't know it was a tree in context, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. And here, really the only way we can identify it as a tree is because of the fields of color. I think that's really interesting. Can you see how the abstraction works? You know, where this is very abstract, this is abstracted. This is abstracted to the point where without context, we don't know what it is. And then this is abstracted so far that unless we have clues to environment, title, color, we have no idea what it is. This reminds me of a stand of poplar trees. But if you don't have that information, it's abstracted to the point where it's almost impossible, isn't it? Do you guys have any idea what this is a painting of?
I'm going to guess it's a tree.
Because of the context. This is Mondrian. Mondrian did a lot of landscape painting, but people at the time did not get that at all. He was active 20s through into the 60s. What is really distinctive about that section of time for an artist, I think, is how much change there was structurally. In the 20s, if you were lucky enough to have access to a phone, you were always going to be on a party line where you would pick up the receiver, make sure that nobody else was active, and then ask an operator to connect you with somebody. By the time you start getting into the 40s, people were having to fundamentally change the landscape in an urban setting because there were all these wires going everywhere. Things were getting wired for electricity, things were getting wired for phone lines, and you had cable cars going everywhere. This was at a time of transition where in a block of apartments, you might have one or two toilets per floor, depending on how much money you were paying in rent, to now people are starting to expect plumbing in every apartment, which was a dramatic change. So Pete Mondrian is dealing with a lot of this. And it seems to me that a lot of choices he made artistically were trying to get a handle on all this activity. Within a matter of 20 years, people went from needing months to communicate with somebody on the other side of the world to getting an almost instant response, where the time was only a factor of how quickly somebody could contact you on the party line so you can make the phone call. I mean, that is unreal, because Pete Mondrian's parents would never have dreamed when they were his age that something like that could happen. Have you guys ever heard of solar flare, a massive solar flare ejection event? This is one of the ongoing, or not ongoing, but in this online security world, this is something that is in the back of everybody's thought. And it is worse than the Y2K thing that could have been a disaster that was averted narrowly by some accounts. And but when a massive solar ejection would occur to release enough radiation that it would actually fry all the above ground wiring on the surface of the planet, which would completely destroy the internet infrastructure. Something like this has already happened. It happened in the 1880s, completely destroyed the copper wire network for the internet of the time, which was otherwise known as telegram. Were you guys aware of this? Completely fried the telegram system. And what is interesting to me is that was just a blip in history because so many people were not connected. But by the time that Mondrian was on the scene, something like that happened, things would be in chaos because people were more connected through wiring on the planet's surface than in any other time in recorded history. And you can just imagine now, 100 years later, how much worse that would be. But that kind of sense of frenetic energy and encroaching anxiety is something that Mondrian worked really hard to deal with. Now I'm looking at this and you're thinking, okay, he's extrapolating a bunch of stuff from an almost non-objective abstract painting. But I want to show you this. These are all by Pete Mondrian. This on the top left is the earlier one when he was working with as an abstract impressionist, or as an almost like a Van Gogh style impressionist. And then we get here on the bottom right is much later when he's really parsed things down to the simplified point where he's doing something, limiting himself with only horizontal and vertical lines, and then a handful of colors that are basically primary and secondary colors. Now we look at this, keep in mind, he is working from nature. We look at this is actually a landscape of a park. This is a cloud up in the air. This is a horizon line. This is the landscape of the park itself. And some of these lines are going to be trees. And perhaps this is a tree or a pond. And I know you don't believe me, but that's fine. This is all 6 of these paintings are of the same tree. Can you see how over the years he is simplifying until he's just using vertical and horizontal lines? And he's removed almost all the color. He's removed almost everything other than bringing the tree in his mind to the most simple of forms. When I show it to you like this, can you believe that this is a landscape? When you see that, how he has simplified everything. I do not expect you guys to work in abstraction simplifying things to this point. What I'm hoping is getting to this point, you can kind of see how he's taking that same tree and he's using swooping lines and forms, and he's simplifying the colors until they're shades of cream. He has like a warm cream and a cool cream that he's working with. But you can see that it's still the same. Can you see that it's still the same tree? I have a hard time. I can kind of find the tree in this. And I like that he's using enough colors that it still helps me. But when we start getting to this, it's very difficult for me to see the tree anymore. And when we get to this bottom right-hand one, it looks to me like a set of Bauhaus cupboards. It doesn't look like a tree anymore. But for Mondrian, as an artist, he's trying to wrap his mind around the increasingly frenetic and energetic world and find a sense of calm and peace in all these things that are happening. Do you get that kind of sense? You know, when we see that in the context like that, can you see him kind of working at trying to overlay calm onto the world around him by abstracting it down to only horizontal lines, only vertical lines, and only the simplest of colors? Have you seen those computer programs that will take something and then blur it out and blur it out and blur it out until it's only a pixelated image of squares? And then the computer program that will take a pixelated image and refine it, and refine it until you see the person's face. Have you seen those kind of programs? In the 90s, this was absolutely instrumental in helping FBI and other law enforcement agencies to actually recognize people and document that blurred photo was something that you could actually use as evidence to identify somebody. And it's kind of reverse engineering what Mondrian did. But this is important. This whole process is important because when we're talking about abstraction, we're talking about going from the naturalistic through the narrative, illustrative, into the symbolic. And we start, what I like about this artist, this lady is actually a friend of mine. I love her stuff because she'll start with shapes and emotions and then abstract them out until all she's working with is just form and color. And it's abstracted to the point where it becomes an experience rather than an engagement with specific objects. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. So as you are working with this module, I want you to first go through all the backgrounds, read the material to introduce it, go through the background, make sure that you watch each and every one of the videos and look at what the people are doing as they're abstracting things. And I wanted to touch on the quiz a little bit today, but it looks like we're going to go over that next week. And what I want you to do is think about things like leaf bases, or how branches connect with each other, what a tooth looks like, what the base of a bone looks like, or a knuckle, those kinds of things where it's the form. And I want you to take the form away from the context so it no longer feels like a knuckle, but you just feel the shapes that are within the knuckle and play with those a little bit. When I do my video that is in the assignment portion of the module, one of the things I'm playing with is I'm thinking in my head scapula, and I'm starting to carve the scapula, but I every time I start getting into a position where I'm going to define, like for example, the triangular shape of a scapula, I stay away from that and I round it instead, or I scoop things out, or I put a hole through it. So I'm starting with a form that I'm familiar with, but I'm pulling away from the things that I easily identify that as the form and try to explore other avenues. And you can do this with lots of different things. Like if you start with a tooth, for example, think about how the different cuspids come together, or think about how the roots branch. And maybe the roots, you want to make them a little bit shorter, or you like the scooping form and you want to explore that a little bit more. Or maybe you're interested in corals and you like the nodules on coral, and so you want to put several nodules together. Or you like fruit and you really enjoy how the banana is curved, which is not a phrase that you would hear in any other context, any other place in the world outside of a sanatorium than in an art class. You know, think about like the base of lettuce, how that feels, or the base of cauliflower or broccoli, how that starts to branch out. Think about those kinds of forms. Take them out of the context that you would normally sit them in and play with that. If you want to start with a fish, for example, what about the fish do you find interesting? Is it how the light glints off? Is it how the fish turns? Then, like Brancusi did with his fish, try to play with the ideas of what are the forms within the fish that your eye gravitates to as the fish is turning, and then play with those kinds of forms. But stay away from making it into a fish. This can be a challenge, and it can also be a fun dance for you to play in your brain as you're working on this. Maybe in your paintings, you really like working with hair. So look at the forms in your paintings that have to do with hair and imagine that in a three-dimensional space, and then just start playing with those structures and stay away and try to move yourself away from it being easily recognizable as hair. Instead, play with the forms and the structures. Maybe you are really intrigued by the idea of splashing water. Start playing with three-dimensional forms of splashing water. Look at, on YouTube, look at videos of splashes that are slowed down. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where they have those bullet cam type things like they developed for the Matrix, but they're taking photos really slowed down of splashes. Maybe some of those forms are really interesting. Don't gravitate to the point of impact, but explore how the forms itself branch out. And then imagine if they didn't have the context of the splash to begin the form of the splash. These are the kinds of things I want you to think about this next week. And so watch all those videos, start playing with those ideas. If you guys have access to clay, and then you can also make clay as well with a really easy way to make your own clay is just shred up some pieces of paper and mix it with some water, and that you can get a putty really, really quickly that you can play with, and play with these kinds of forms. I would recommend before you start this carving, make 3 or 4 sculptures like that, where you're just playing and squishing. And maybe a good one would be to squish it so the goo comes out between your fingers. If you do choose to make a paste like this with just paper and water, do not dump it out the sink. Make sure you throw it in the garbage can. Dump it down the sink. None of your roommates will forgive you ever. So don't do that. All right? So play with this idea, and that's what I want you to work on specifically this week. Reassess your structure and skin. Work on looking at each of those videos and play with the idea just of forming shapes that are abstracted forms where you take them specifically out of the context of the origination. All right? So everybody do that. Play with these ideas of abstraction. We're looking at biomorphic abstraction specifically, and that's why I want you to make sure you watch each and every one of those videos. Okay? And then we'll talk about that again on Wednesday when we meet. Any final questions or observations before we break for the week? All right. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for sitting still with me for so long. And I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with next week. Again, Wednesday we'll be covering this quiz, and we'll be looking at how people improve their structure and skin things. And then we'll also be starting or initiating conversations about the biomorphic abstraction. If you have any questions or anything about the stuff that we're covering, email me and we'll make sure that we talk about it next week. All right?
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Right.
Thanks so much. See you next week.
Okay, we'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.